Luke, do you mind like retweeting it? Oh. What's going on, everybody? We are back. We got episode number 66 of the Club and Sub podcast. Lags will not be joining us tonight. So you got me at John Stargarian at MMA Fox and Luke at SWR _betting. As always, we're brought to you guys by betonline.ag for a free 50% bonus up to your first $1,000 deposit. Use the promo code Club Sub. And guys, yeah, if you like the show, please drop a like and subscribe. We'd really appreciate it. It would mean a lot. And yeah, we're looking forward to getting into this one. It's an interesting card to say the least. I have some bets here. It's fairly low level compared to, well, I guess not that low level compared to what we've been seeing recently. But anyway, I'm excited to get into it. So we will hop right in. First fight of the night, we got Alejandro Perez taking on Johnny Eduardo. Luke, any thoughts here?
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I do think the line on Perez is like a tad high, but I can't possibly bet Johnny Eduardo either. I need a much bigger number. Um, Eduardo more so kind of your killer be killed archetype, but kind of in his defense, his losses really outside of Matt Lopez really aren't all that bad, Aljo, Nathaniel Wood. But coming off a 2.5-year layoff and is 41 years old, I've even heard actually from my boy Wheezy that actually might be short, and he's actually 43 years old. So I'm not sure which number is actually accurate there, but I've heard some 43. So definitely, not encouraging from a general narrative standpoint, but more so I'm just not like in love with Perez's game. He's not particularly high output. He hasn't been like a potent finisher in the UFC, hasn't really aggressively wrestled much. Even in the fights he's won up by points, many of them have been reasonably close, even in those decisions. So we'll see. But I mean, yeah, I definitely favor him, moderately in this fight. I think, him like 65-66%, I think is probably about right. But yeah, up around that minus 260, I think, for him to really cover that price tag, he's got to knock out Johnny Eduardo, who's, traditionally, losing by sub, which I think is interesting to note as well. So it's just kind of a dumpster fire of a fight. And I really wouldn't be shocked if Eduardo pulled the upset, if I'm being honest. So he's actually my pick more so from a value side, but I do think Perez deserves to be a moderate favorite.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty much right there with you. It's a weird fight because pretty much the entirety of what it comes down to is whether or not Johnny Eduardo is still has anything left, right? You know, he's like you said, 41 on the low side, 43 on the high side, and hasn't fought since 2018. But the last time we saw him fight, he fought Nathaniel Wood, and he looked pretty good until he got finished in that fight. Um, Now, how much does he have left now? I don't really know, but I do know in his day, Eduardo was at least a decent guy, and he kept a pretty high output standing. And kind of to your point, Perez. I mean, he's okay. He's a decent athlete who hits hard, but doesn't do a whole lot of anything. But yeah, I mean, I don't really have a strong opinion here. Like 4 years ago, I would have bet Perez at this line as a no brainer. But yeah, I just don't feel comfortable. I guess I'd pick Eduardo just because you know all the upside that Eduardo's just done, and Perez can just kind of do whatever he wants. So, yeah, again, no strong feeling. So I'm with you, Luke. Moving on, we have Shanna Young coming back off a loss with Macy Chiasson, taking on Stephanie Egger. I took a small piece of Edgar minus 105 here for about a unit. I'm not like totally in love with the play. Like I think Egger is pretty bad to be honest, but what she is a proactive grappler, and she's a big girl who, look, she got dumpstered by Tracy Cortez in her first fight, and but like Tracy Cortez is a very good grappler, and it just seemed like a better grappler, just winning a very low variance fight. But she actually had some success in scrambles there early in the fight, and like looking at it here with Shanna Young, Young's definitely the better striker, but she doesn't really move her head offensively, and defensively, it's just what kind of makes this almost like a must bet for me. I've seen Young taken down and have her back taken and controlled 4 or 5 times. She's been rear naked choked a bunch of times. Look, I think if she can keep the fight standing, I think she wins this fight pretty cleanly in all likelihood. I don't know. Like the kind of girl I'm looking to bet against Edgar is someone who's either a better grappler or someone who I think can play kind of the stick and move game on the outside. I don't think Young has that striking wise, and I know if there's extended grappling sequences here, Edgar's going to probably dominate. And so, yeah, I mean, it could be a close fight. I don't think Edgar's a great wrestler, but she has much higher upside here. What do you think, Luke?
Yeah, I'm kind of with you as well. I did a deeper dive back into Young. Was familiar with her, but not like overtly familiar with her. So I actually watched a decent amount of tape. Guess she comes from actually a Taekwondo background, which you kind of see on display in her fights. She throws a lot of the kicks and stuff, but traditionally for someone who, has that as a base, to your point, her head movement isn't very good. I don't think she can manage distance effectively with consistency at all. Girls are pretty reliable to hit her pretty much whenever they want and when they decide to come forward. I guess she also does come from a wrestling background too, which I was kind of surprised to to learn, as that's traditionally how she's losing her fights. To your point, I don't think like her first level takedown defense is like bad per se, but girls have been able to get in on her hips and they are able to get her down, and she's just got a really poor defensive tendency to give her back. And Edgar, strong judo background, multi-time world champion, to your point, not exactly an advantageous matchup against Cortez, strong wrestler. So I think it's like a decent bounce back spot for her. Obviously I do favor Young on the feet, but honestly, like, I don't even think it's by that much because, as touched on, she's a punching bag. And at least, despite Edgar not really being technical at all, she does throw. She's shown she can take a shot. So in my opinion, it could just kind of look like a sloppy Mara Barella type of deal where both girls are just landing shots. And it's like, okay, well then give me the girl with the wrestling and grappling upside with Edgar here, who I think actually could be sneaky live for a sub. I think her sub props are like around plus 600, plus 700 on some books. Might be taking a poke at that. And just one other quick point on Young too, I want to note, she is just coming off of having a baby less than 11 months ago too. And said it's pretty substantially affected her ability to train consistently. She's also taking this fight up at 135 pounds, when she's traditionally a flyweight, and we kind of saw her just get dumpstered at 135 by Chiasson. Her Contender Series fight was at 135 as well with homegirl. Who did we just see against
Sarah
Blanfield?
Alpar.
Alpar. So it's like she's not like a small 135, but it's not her right weight class, and her taking it more so, I think, because she's like, oh, great, I'm getting another opportunity. I haven't been in the best of shape as of the last 10 or so months given the circumstance. So I don't know, putting all that into the soup, I think Edgar's worth a small play as well. I think she just has more upside in fight.
Yeah, no, I agree with you completely. Moving on. Any thoughts here? We got Douglas de Andrade coming back and taking on Gaetano Perello. Both of them fought on, I believe it was the Wednesday card this past year in the first week. It's been a while since we've seen either. Any thoughts?
I'm not the biggest Andrade guy in the world, just based on like overall metrics and stuff. He actually does crack. He hits reasonably hard. He's going to load everything into his shots, and then is reasonably accurate in doing so. So even the times he has one on the cards, despite him maybe not being like uber high output, what he does do is effective. His takedown defense has looked okay. His strength of competition's been much higher. Uh, I'm just not a big fan of Perello. I know people talk that he's like, Muay Thai world champ guy. I take nothing away from him getting ragdolled by Simone on short notice in his debut. It's just kind of like whatever. But even going back and watching his fights on the regionals, hasn't faced much adversity. And pretty much when he has, and anytime guys go forward on him and throw, he's getting hit pretty clean consistently. He can be wrestled as well. So I think Andrade, it's kind of a similar spot in some capacities to Perez and Eduardo in a lot of ways. I'm not in love with Andrade's game for me to necessarily go and lay minus 240, minus 260 on him per se. But I do think he wins the fight at a decent clip. He is dropping back down to 135 too. He's another dude who's pretty jacked and massive and doesn't have much to lose. So we'll see how that cut goes. But I do actually think that's probably his more rightful weight classes. I think he's just a bit outsized from a length perspective at 145. So I think it's a decent spot for Andrade. I think Perello is not a UFC caliber fighter.
Yeah, I'm pretty much with you. I mean, I don't have a bet, but like the line could be wider in my opinion. I think. It's another one. Andrade is getting, what is he, about 35 now, 36? He's starting to age and he's young, or not young, and he's small. And like, that's always a concern that when it could go, it could go. But truthfully, kind of like what you said, Luke, look, Perello, when you let him go forward and swarm, like he's got some power, he can hurt you, but I don't think he's got much technique wise. Like you said, if you go forward on him, he tends to just get hit a lot. And so, Andrade is famously durable. I really don't think Perello is very likely to knock him out. And it's just like so hard for me to see him consistently winning minutes on the feet here. And, someone, Kaiser S, just mentioned in the chat, if he actually decided to wrestle here, he can probably do whatever he wants to Perello. I don't really want to lay minus 250 with Andrade given his age and his size, but honestly, he should handle him pretty easily here, in my opinion. Moving on, we got Jamie Malarkey taking on Devontae Smith. I haven't made a bet here yet, but I am thinking about betting Malarkey, if I'm being honest. It's kind of funny because, like, before tape, I saw minus 150 on Smith against Malarkey, and I was like, man, Smith looked really good against James. This is probably pretty narrow. And then I went back and looked through, and it's like he didn't look nearly as good as I remembered against James. To be honest, I kind of think Smith's been getting by largely on his athleticism. He's very, very fast. He hits very, very hard, but he doesn't. What we have seen him look very bad in the grappling. He lost to John Gunther that way. It's been 5 years, and he's at a good camp, so it's possible he's improved that. But and on the other side, defensively as a striker, when guys have been able to get in the pocket, he's right there to be hit. And I just don't really like the way he reacts to shots at all, really. He obviously got flatlined by Kamaworthy, and then James actually hurt him on the feet in the next fight. And so that's a concern. And with Malarkey, like, look, Malarkey's not very good, but what he is very durable. He's willing to bite down and throw. We saw that in the Worthy fight. It's how he put him out. And look, he's willing to grapple aggressively. And so, like, I know if I bet Malarkey, he's going to attempt somewhere between 6 and 10 takedowns. And if Smith's game hasn't improved, he is going to get drowned here and probably finished on the mat. And if he can't get it, he'll at least be willing to go out in his shield. And like Malarkey went toe to toe with Brad Riddell. He obviously lost the fight cleanly, but he hurt Riddell on the feet and just kept coming at him the entire fight. And so even if he can't get the takedowns, it's like, I think Smith might be fragile, and I know Malarkey's durable, and he's going to give himself at least a chance to knock him out. And so, like, looking at the plus 135, I want a better number, but like, I'm kind of willing to stab it. Like, I sort of think Malarkey should be a slight favorite. What do you think?
Yeah, I think from a betting perspective, at least pre-fight, I think you probably have to go with Malarkey. It's a pass for me. But I just think there is definitely more of a merit value based case to taking the dog stab here. But just a lot of general questions for me. I think just from at least a stand-up stylistic standpoint, I think just like an athlete, speed, power type of guy is going to give Malarkey some serious issues. To your point, though, maybe there is some merit that Smith is fragile, but I'm not willing to jump into that boat yet. So I slightly lean him in this fight. I think I put him like 55% or so, but gun to my head, if I was going to bet it, I would bet Malarkey for the reasons that you mentioned, John. At least 100% with Malarkey that he is going to fight for your money. You know what to 100% expect from him, for better or for worse, if it gets him killed or he is able to grind out the fight and extend it. So I just think there are more general knowns on Malarkey in that capacity, but kind of that speed, power, and athleticism just terrifies me for Malarkey. So it's a pass for me, but don't hate the Malarkey stabs.
Moving on, stick with you here, Luke. We got Karol Hosa taking on Betch Kahaya. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's honestly, I've always given Betch a little bit more credit than most people have in general, just because if you've looked at her strength of competition over the years, it's been pretty high. And, even in the decisions she's been to, I mean, she's usually pretty competitive on volume and strikes. But the reality is she's 38 years old now. She's had her retirement announced for over a year now. Hosa, surging, solid prospect, is going to be ridiculously higher output. Obviously, both girls flawed defensively. But that volume, I think, of Hosa is just much more consistent. I'm not necessarily convinced Kahaya can just like counter box her extended at all, and that just traditionally just doesn't win in WMMA anyway. More often than I also think the wrestling upside is there for Hosa. I know Kohea's takedown defense historically has been pretty good. But I don't think she's also faced a ton of takedown attempts, at least more so in recent years too. So I think that path is potentially there for Hosa to win this fight. I think you're kind of paying a bit of a premium on Hosa here, given the retirement thing on Kohea, but I definitely think she deserves to be a sizable favorite here.
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree. It's kind of funny because I think Betch for her career has kind of been perpetually underrated, and her, what she's done has been a bit underrated. And I bet Betch last fight against Pani, and that did not look great. Pani boxed her up. But the reason I did it, and it's the same thing that for briefly I considered betting Betch here, was the Aldana fight, like the fight before that. Irene Aldana is probably one of the closer comps you can find in WMMA to Carol Hosa. And that was a really close fight. They were basically exchanging back and forth up until Betch got armbarred there. And so, like, I remember thinking about that, like, man, she could really give Hosa a run. But then you just watch it, and it's like Hosa's going to be so much bigger than her. Plus, the degree of volume Hosa throws is really fairly unprecedented. And so I feel like Betch probably needs to hurt her standing in moments to win a decision. And I just don't think Betch hurting or finishing her is very likely. And I don't really think, I think there's some questions about Hosa's defensive grappling. I don't really think Betch has the wrestling ability to really test it. Even if she does get her down, I'd be a little surprised for her to hold it there. And so it's just like, I don't know. There's a part of me that's like, well, Procopio had a super close standing fight with Hosa, and Betch had a close fight with Aldana. Maybe this is going to be a close fight. But I'm also kind of just like, do I really want to, trust my money with Betch and then get angry when she does something meme again? Not really. Yeah. So, like, I think Hosa should be a fairly big favorite. I do think getting up near plus 400, I might just have to take a poke on principle. But yeah, no super strong feelings. Moving on, Luke, going to go back to you here. We got Antonina Shevchenko taking on Casey O'Neil. Take me away.
Yeah, I know you have a pretty hot take, strong take here, so I'll keep it brief. In my opinion, it's a pretty binary fight. I think the levels on the feet between the two are pretty gigantic. I think MMA by the numbers actually put out a tweet earlier today too that I think like Little Shev actually has like the 6th best striking accuracy in WMMA right now or something like that. Like that's pretty legit. I think it's like 50, 54 or something percent. But obviously, strong Muay Thai game. O'Neil, Oceanic regional scene kind of goes forward, lets it fly, fights Dobson, absolute bum. And even Dobson, had some early success in that fight on the feet too. Procopio had early success in the first round. So, I mean, when this fight is at range or in the clinch, I think it's a pretty tough proposition for O'Neil, to be honest. But as we know, Shevchenko's takedown defense isn't great. Her bottom game is pretty horrible. She's been subbed a handful of times, grounded, pounded on. O'Neil, purple belt in jiu-jitsu, will proactively look to wrestle. So I think that's the main credence to O'Neil. But I do think the line is a little ridiculous, if I'm being completely honest. It's not enough for me to take the poke because it's just one of those fights where if I bet Shev and then she just gets taken down within the first 10 seconds and can't get up, it's like, fuck, why did I do that? But if the line gets too crazy, I'm willing to take the shot on principle. I think Shevchenko could potentially finish her standing too. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a huge bet on Shevchenko, but I do have a bet on Shevchenko here. I have a 1 unit bet on her money line and a half unit on Shevchenko by KO at plus 800. You know, I guess for me, look, obviously I bet Procopio big against O'Neil, and that looked really fucking awful in hindsight. But Procopio won the first round of that fight pretty cleanly and then gassed out. And if we're being honest, like, I have nothing against O'Neil. In fact, I think her style, that kind of pure aggro aggressive style, is going to win her a lot of fights in the UFC just because there's not many, female fighters that have that kind of aggression. But on the other hand, with like, she hasn't seen anything like this before. Like, let's just take a go back to for a second, a year ago. Anthony Shevchenko was minus 150 against Katlyn Chookagian, who is the number one ranked fighter in this division. Like, and everybody was fine with it. People were betting Shevchenko. Gets dominated in the grappling there, whatever. Next fight is minus 180 against Andrea Lee. Again, a girl who we knew would grapple, despite knowing the grappling holds Shevchenko, and everybody was okay with it. Loses that fight, and now here we are. Casey O'Neil, who was plus 150 against Laura Procopio last fight, is now minus 230 against Shevchenko. Like, I get it. Styles make fights. But here's the reality. Casey O'Neil got out scrambled briefly by Shanna Dobson and got mounted for a second. Like, that happened no matter what, whether you want to pretend it didn't or not. We have seen this girl get dominated in the clinch regionally by a 0-2 chick. We also saw her get flatlined twice as an amateur under a minute. Literally, that happened again. And like, I appreciate O'Neil's aggression and everything. But number one, I think the idea that Shevchenko is going to just get badly out grappled here just because Katlyn Chookagian and Andrea Lee and Roxanne Modafferi did is kind of crazy. You know, we saw her sub Pudilova on the mat and out grapple Ariane Lipski, right? You know, am I ready to say O'Neil is a much better grappler than them? I mean, I think she has a better top game and she's more willing, but like, I don't know. You know, she's so aggressive. She falls out of positions a lot. She gets way too aggressive advancing and gets reversed a lot. And so it's like, I don't really buy, even if O'Neil hits takedowns, that she's a lock to smash. And on top of it, I think she's going to struggle to get her down. You know, they're going to go to the clinch, and Shev's really dangerous in the clinch, whereas I don't think O'Neil is great there. And then just kind of taking it back a step further, it's just like, I get it. O'Neil's super aggressive pursuing takedowns, but what happens the first time she eats a 1-2 or catches a hard counter coming in? Is she going to stay that aggressive? I don't know. She might, or suddenly she'll get timid. And if that happens, you know, like you said, you know, the striking level here is just gigantic. And so, like, I have a bet on Chev. I think the line is being mispriced. I don't think I'm super passionate that Casey O'Neil shouldn't be 70% against someone who's been fighting top 10 fighters, but I also am very cognizant of the fact that we have seen Chev get dominated on the mat previously. And so it's a small bet, but I do just think like it's very hard for me to put this much past evens, to be honest with you. But moving on, we got Joe Salecki taking on Jared Gordon. And I feel pretty passionate about this one. Gordon's actually my biggest bet of the night here. I have about 3 units on him at plus 140. I honestly have thought about adding to it, to be completely honest. You know, I like Joe Salecki. I bet him huge against Austin Hubbard last year. But like, if you actually take a look at what he's done in the UFC, is it really that impressive? Like, he dominated Matt Wyman on the ground, who has no defensive grappling to speak of. He fought Hubbard, who, you know, gives up his back faster than a hooker, for being honest. And then he fought, and we fought, and that was very predictable. You know, we all talked about that on this podcast about how he was going to go and submit Hubbard. And then he fought Jim Miller, who should be a great stylistic matchup for him. And he did win the fight, but he did lose round 1. He got stuck on his back and didn't try to get up and instead played guard, which is a huge red flag. But like, that's his whole sample in the UFC to date. I don't think his striking is anything to write home about. And in terms of his wrestling, like, he's hit takedowns, but we really haven't seen him face anybody who's given him much resistance to defensive grappling, not regionally and not in the UFC at all. And so I'm not really ready to say he's a great wrestler. And I do think his entries seem a bit slow. And on the other side, you have Gordon. And look, we all know the flaws of Jared Gordon. He's very chinny. He can be defensively unsound, but what he is a master of pace who just fights an extremely high pace at all times. He attempts a ton of takedowns, and he has very, very good jiu-jitsu. And so when looking at this fight, I'm like, I think Gordon's the better striker here. I think he's the better wrestler, most likely. I know if Gordon gets grounded, he can work up. Like, he may give his back, but he denies hooks well and fights hands very well. And I know if Salecki gets grounded, that he can get stuck on his back. We've seen it happen. And so on top of that, we have the fact that Gordon has fought really, really high-level competition, while Salecki's basically had 3 matchups gifted to him so far in the UFC. And so, like I said, I like Salecki as a fighter. You know, I like he's a guy that's willing to go to, you know, what works. I just don't think it's going to work against Gordon. I think Gordon should be a pretty decent-sized favorite, if I'm being honest. I have him at about 65%. Luke, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm on Gordon as well. I don't want to rehash everything you said because that's pretty much my my same sentiments as well. But I guess that's my kind of big question is that we haven't seen Salecki faced much striking based adversity, and despite, you know, maybe some of the durability issues with Gordon, you know, the knockouts hindsight really aren't that bad. And, you know, Salecki hasn't really shown to be, you know, the biggest hitter. And let alone how often have we even seen Joe Salecki in like extended range striking exchanges? Like not very often. So to your point, it kind of, in some capacities, kind of goes even to the Malarkey consideration. You know, he's a guy who's he's willing to do things. You know, he's going to have a good gas tank, good grappler, brown belt under Danaher, decent boxing, you know, as long as he just doesn't go like completely life or death like he did with Neto BJJ and gas and die. But
he was also on one leg in that fight too, though, at the end.
That's true. But, so yeah, and I think you brought up a good point too, where even if Salecki does get him down, like traditionally he does a good job, you know, at putting on a body triangle and stuff. But to your point, you know, Gordon's shown pretty much elite defensive responsibility in any sort of compromising position he's been in. So, you know, maybe if he's able to put Gordon in those positions, you know, maybe he is the guy that will be able to make Gordon pay for that. But I'm not necessarily convinced about that. And I think he might be able to scramble into top position in those scenarios, let alone he just might be able to out wrestle Joe Salecki, to be completely honest. So, kind of rehashed a lot of what you just said, but that's my thoughts as well. I don't think Gordon should have a plus number next to his name.
Mr. X has it right. He will die for your money. That is true about Jared Gordon. You know what you're going to get from him. Hopefully it's not him getting knocked out this weekend. Moving on, we got Alex Hernandez against Mike Breeden. What do you think here, Luke?
Yeah, obviously Hernandez, biggest favorite on the card, largely justified. I'm going to say nothing disparaging about Hernandez, otherwise Magic will probably kill me because I think he's expecting decapitation here. But actually, probably what I will say is actually going to piss Magic off a little bit. I don't think Breeden's very good. I don't think he's a UFC caliber fighter. Obviously getting a second crack from the Contender Series, but I guess like the one thing I give him credit for is the guy seems tough. You know, he seems durable. I'd say he's serviceable, but not really good anywhere. He just kind of falls into the like solid regional level fighter category to me. Whereas, you know, Hernandez has had his own issues, of course, but guy's been fighting elite level competition. So despite going 4-3 in the UFC, you know, it is what it is. I have my own theories about, you know, him getting pushed a bit too fast and whatnot, but that's neither here nor there. I think he's just the better fighter in every category here. Therefore, you know, him being, you know, 80-85% is cool.
You know, I forgave Alex Hernandez for losing me a bunch of money against Donald Cerrone. I have not yet forgiven him for losing me a bunch of money against Thiago Moises. But I still don't get how Moises was able to outvolume him, to be honest. But anyway, yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you said. Breeden's a tough guy, but yeah, he's like the equivalent of a 4A baseball player. He's a high regional fighter who's always going to do pretty well in the high regionals, but I think he probably lacks the athleticism and really technical ability to have much success in the UFC, especially without being a big-time grappler. And so, yeah, I mean, maybe he'll hang around for a couple fights, but I don't think he's a UFC level fighter, really. And like you said, Hernandez has fought elite competition. Every time he has taken a step down to fight less than elite competition, he's looked pretty good. I don't have a bet here. I do think Hernandez KO, if you have one of the books that has plus 150, is a pretty decent number. You know, Hernandez hits pretty hard, and if he's having, you know, the degree of success I expect him to, with standing KOs live, kind of similar to what happened with Grutzmacher, to be honest. But again, I don't feel super passionate about it. Moving on, we got Aspen Ladd and Macy Chiasson. Makes me a little nauseous, but I laid the wood with Ladd around minus 200. I think the line is starting to trend toward being right now. I had her about minus 300 myself, but I guess my thinking is just, look, I get it on the feet. Chiasson should be able to hit her like when they're at distance, but I also kind of think Ladd's probably going to be able to hit her as well. And you know, obviously it's hard to remove the GDR fight from your brain, but, you know, there's pretty much no one other than Amanda Nunes who hits like GDR does in WMMA. And so I'm not really overly concerned about a standing Chiasson KO. Like, it could happen, but I don't think it's very high percentage. And in the grappling, I just don't really think this is close. You know, We saw Chiasson pretty much get out grappled by Lena Landsberg. We saw her struggle with Grandma Marion in her last fight. And then you have Aspen Ladd, who I was very skeptical on coming into the UFC. And I still have some issues with her game. But in terms of the grappling, like her being able to have like win scrambles with Ciara Eubanks and kind of beat her up in the grappling as much as she did in that fight, she's a very, very solid grappler. And if she gets you down, she's going to put you in bad positions, especially someone like Macy Chiasson. They're going to clinch a lot because both girls like to do it. I think Ladd's way stronger. I think she's way better there. And I think she probably gets her down and dominates here, to be completely honest. What do you think, Luke?
So not as strong of a take for me. I'm definitely not a Chiasson fan by any means, have my own issues. But I guess in regards to the matchup, I do think, I don't think Macy's just completely screwed here, just given Ladd's defensive issues. And she has been significantly outstruck in the clinch by both Landsberg and Kunitskaya, where, Chiasson is traditionally, the strongest, she is. But I don't really like her at space. I guess the main issue I have with Macy is that I've just seen pretty much no evolution in her since The Ultimate Fighter. She's kind of been the same girl, and that's where I kind of always was with her. I was like, okay, she's still green, obviously older, but still green. She'll make some improvements fight to fight here and there. And, the girl's 9-1, props, but her strength of comp's been pretty low, and she's just always kind of been the same fighter to me. So, but to your point, and why I do think Ladd should be a decent sized favorite, I do think it's starting to get a tad wide for me personally. But is the ground, we've seen Macy look absolutely horrible on bottom in the capacities that she's been there. Ladd, elite top game, ground and pound, isn't going to just sit there and lay and pray. Finished, I think, like 66% of her wins via ground and pound. So if she gets Macy down, I don't really see why she couldn't. I think she's fine. But if this is, a stand-up fight and in the clinch, I probably wouldn't feel very comfortable with like a minus 250 on Ladd. Just me.
Yeah, fair. Moving on, we got Misha Cirkunov taking on Krzysztof Jotko. Any take here, Luke?
Yeah, we were kind of talking about this one before we jumped on. I think Misha's the side personally, but I think the main talking point is that he's going down to 185 for the first time in his career, and he's 34 years old and was a 6'3" jacked 205 with not an ounce of fat on him. So I'm not really sure how this weight cut is going to go, and I'm not overtly optimistic about it. Also, considering, he hasn't exactly been known for his iron durability historically. So, a really shitty weight cut, I don't think is necessarily the greatest thing in the world to aid in that going forward. But I've also just never been the biggest Chris Jotko fan. I don't think the guy's looked good in like the last 5 years outside of Amidovsky, but that's, Amidovsky. His issues is that, he doesn't really have a real sense of urgency throughout the course of the fight in terms of letting his hands go, slower paced. His offensive wrestling isn't overtly strong. I think he is a brown belt in jiu-jitsu, but haven't seen a ton of offensive grappling upside from him. Honestly, through watching him over the years, I think the guy's just kind of a head case, to be honest. I think it's more so mental with him because I don't think like his overall skill set is actually that bad. I think he's actually a decent fighter. I don't know. I think there's just something about the bright lights that get to him personally, and Cirkunov hits really hard. Like I said, he's going to be the guy going down here. I think he's going to have strong advantages in the clinch, obviously an elite level grappler. So despite Jocko's takedown defense at 87%, I think Misha's going to be able to test that. We'll just have to see, how he looks on the scales, what his chin potentially looks like, and how his gas tank is, because that's also another talking point. Hasn't been in many overall extended fights outside of the Kudalaba fight, which he won, by the way, which was also slower pace. So I don't know. I think at plus money, better grappler, more willingness to do things, probably higher finishing upside, I'd say. I'd rather back Cirkunov at plus money.
Yeah, I'm with you. I haven't made a bet on it. I have kind of the same issues with Jotko. Like, he's technically very, very good. In theory, and he seems like a decent athlete. Like, he should be good, but he doesn't really do anything. He's shown moments of fragility. And to be honest, even though he won the Anders fight, that fight was pretty concerning because he pretty much just let Anders hold him in the clinch for like 9 minutes of that fight. Yeah, I mean, I shouldn't say I don't rate Jocko. Like, he's still someone who I'm like, if he actually figured it out, would be really, really good. I just can't count on him to do it. And Serkinov, on the other hand, like, I like Serkinov's game. He's a pretty good striker. He's obviously an excellent grappler. But like you, I'm a bit confused here. Like, his game should work great at 205. And I know he keeps getting knocked out, but I'm not really sure how dropping to 185 is supposed to help that. Like, he's not a little dude by any means, but I do agree, like, skill wise, I think he's the better fighter everywhere. It's just how bad is that cut going to be? And is he going to melt every time he gets touched? Like, is he going to dominate 2 rounds here and then get melted by a jab in round 3? Like, I don't know. It's, I'm considering it. I'm kind of with you about seeing him on the scales. I think, well, that should at least tell us something about how it went, hopefully. And I'm not that guy ever really, but I do think it's worth seeing in this case just because it's such a big cut for such a big guy. But yeah, I mean, it's hard. I mean, if you're betting this fight, you pretty much have to be betting Serkinov, I think. Moving on, we got Nico Price taking on Alex Oliveira. Any thoughts on this one, Luke?
Yeah, I think it's actually a decent spot for Nico, but I don't know. Both of these guys are just extremely difficult to trust historically. But I guess my main 2 talking points is that Price, is just kind of the more willing party to do things. Despite his inconsistency, you at least know that Nico Price is going to show up for better or for worse, where you don't really know that about Cowboy Oliveira. But if the best guy shows up, I've said it for a while. I think he can, hang with some of the best guys in the world if the best guy shows up. But we have those issues there. He's not overtly high output. When he does wrestle, he's had success, but his gas tank is extremely bad in extended fights that are also grappling intensive to boot. He's been submitted, and I think damn near all of his losses as well. Price, not a historic submission threat, but a decent grappler who's going to kind of at least just throw the kitchen sink and make you work in that capacity. So that's more so why I'm on the side of Price. I just trust his activity and willingness to do things, which historically is probably not good signs for Oliveira down the stretch. But we obviously know the defensive inefficiencies with Price. Oliveira, despite not being a perennial KO artist recently, I mean, the guy, he can crack. He hits pretty hard. He's got some explosive nature to him. So, him putting down Price would not be shocking, but I'm just not in love with Oliveira and just his general minute winning ability upside in this fight.
Yeah, like, to be honest, a couple years ago, I probably would have bet Oliveira in this spot. But yeah, it's kind of funny because I agree with what you said about Price, and I feel the same way about Oliveira. Like, if Oliveira shows up the best he can, he'd be massive value here and maybe even a favorite, to be honest. But like, when was the last time that happened? I'll give him credit that he does seem to always make fights close, but he hasn't like genuinely looked good in a fight in years, literal years. And on the other side, you have Price, who's had this weird evolution from being a guy with one punch power and like no volume or grappling or anything else to now being kind of a competent grappler and an absolute pace machine, which has been pretty wild to see. But yeah, and so like, I guess I'm with you. Like, I don't even know, like, gun to my head, like, which side I'd pick, because I do think there are things Oliveira could do. Like, if Oliveira came out and wrestled hard and attempted 6-7 takedowns, I think him having some success and winning this fight is in play. The problem for me is I don't know if the cardio is there. I don't know if the interest is there. And on the end, if the cardio is not there, Price is going to keep coming. We just saw that against Michel Pereira, who is probably a better version of Oliveira at his best, if we're being honest. And, Price was coming on hard down the stretch. I don't know. I guess, I mean, I think the line's right. Like, I wouldn't really bet aside, like, even gun to my head. I don't think. I think Price's prop has much better winning tools. But, if Oliveira could spark him, and if he comes out and decides to wrestle, you don't want to have it bet at minus 170 and watch Price get taken down 3 or 4 times and held down, right? So, yeah, I mean, it's a pass for me, but it should be a really fun fight if we're being honest. Moving on, we got Kevin Holland taking on Kyle-Dawkis. What do you think, Luke?
Yeah. I've been the Kevin Holland truther, the Kevin Holland supporter for a while. I do think he knocks Kyle-Dawkis out in this fight, but as per, every Kevin Holland fight, it's the same talking point, can he stuff takedowns? If he does face a lot of takedowns, can he work back up? Because that's pretty much the common theme in every single one of his losses, even in some of his wins, like the Darren Stewart fight that was incredibly close, had a significant wrestling component as well. Dawkis will attempt takedowns. It's just, he's 6'3", and I don't think he's a great wrestler to boot either. So I'm not really in the camp that Dawkis, just by virtue of him attempting takedowns, that he just like auto gets them. We were kind of talking about it before the pod too, where it's like, he's not necessarily elite on top necessarily. He has lost position at times as well. And I've been saying it for a second too, that when Dawkis gets stuck at space with someone fast and explosive and just a better athlete than him, he's going to get nuked. But I think actually from like a technical boxing perspective, he's not bad. It's just, I think Holland pretty much nightmares for him on the feet. So binary, I guess, in that capacity for me. If Dawkis is able to get off on the grappling, then, shame on me 10,000 times for picking and even betting Kevin Holland in certain scenarios. But I do think he knocks out Dawkis in this fight. But I really don't hate anybody betting Dawkis either, because I think there is, a very clear argument to be made.
Man, I think the line is about right, to be honest. I think Holland in the 60 to 65% range is kind of accurate. To be honest, like, I get the argument for Dawkis. Dawkis will attempt takedowns. Everybody takes down Kevin Holland. Kevin Holland got dominated in his last 8 rounds, being taken down and held down. But it's like, I don't know. Is Kyle Dawkis, Derek Brunson, or Marvin Vettori either in the wrestling or on top? I don't think he's anywhere close to either of them, to be completely honest with you. And look, he's got a black belt, like, for sure, but it's not like Kyle Dawkis is this king of just locking down position on the mat and holding guys there. And look, we've seen plenty of other guys take Kevin Holland down, but I mean, look at those fights. He managed to initiate scrambles with GM3, with Brendan Allen, with Alessio Di Chirico. The only times he's been controlled that much were in his debut by Thiago Santos and by Derek Brunson and Marvin Vettori. And again, I'm not saying Dawkis can't do that here, but it's a big step down in terms of grappling from those two guys. And I don't know if Holland will have made any improvements, but allegedly he's been training nothing but wrestling for the last 4 months. And standing, I honestly think he's going to touch Dawkis up bad on the feet. Holland's a pretty underrated striker and also hits pretty hard and has a massive, massive speed advantage here. I think he's going to beat Dawkis. While they're standing, I think he's going to beat Dawkis up bad and has a chance to flatline him, if I'm being honest. I guess my view is for Dawkis to win this fight consistently, he probably needs to get 8+ minutes of top time. Without that, I just don't know that anything he's going to do on the mat is going to be enough to offset, the striking standing. And like I said, I have real questions about whether or not Dawkis is going to be able to just grapple him the way Vettori and Brunson did. If he does, then okay. But like, it's easy to forget now, but Kevin Holland closed at like -185 against Derek Brunson 2 fights ago. and now he's a smaller favorite against Kyle Dawkis, which is, it's bizarre. And I'm not saying it necessarily means anything, but I just don't. This is a big step down for Holland and a big step up for Dawkis. If Dawkis passes this test, great. But the guy just got out cardioed by Phil Hawes, so I'm not really running to the window to put my money on him, if I'm being completely honest. Moving on, we got the main event. We got Thiago Santos. We got Johnny Walker. This main event is hilarious, and it should be awesome for as long as it lasts. Our boy Lags took a prop that I also tailed him on, which is fight doesn't start round 4 at about -168 on FanDuel. I took that with him. I shouldn't say I don't have strong conviction on his side. I do think there's probably value on Thiago Santos here. He's the better grappler, probably, or definitely. He's the better striker, technically. He's the more durable fighter. Losing to Johnny Walker would be a big step down from the guys he's been losing to here. And on the other side, with Walker, I don't think he's gotten better skills anywhere, but he is explosive and he can finish anybody in one shot. And so for me, like, I favor Santos, but I do think unless Santos goes super wrestling heavy, this is a pretty strong chance to hit. Walker's going to go out there and try to go out in his shield, putting him out. And Walker's also the epitome of a glass cannon. He's insanely fragile. And so I do worry that Santos is just going to come out and take him down 4 times and hold him down and win a decision. But I don't think it's that likely. He hasn't attempted more than one takedown in a fight in like 4 years. So yeah, I mean, I like the under. Where it doesn't start round 4. I lean Santos. I probably lean him at the line too if I were to make a bet. Luke, how about you?
Honestly, the line's gotten down to a point where I just might lay Santos money line, to be completely honest. I really didn't want to, given, the main talking points of the fight, but it's one of those weird fights where I guess you can't probably cap a Johnny Walker fight through a conventional lens. Like, I mean, like to your point, we all know what he's good at. He's fast, he's explosive, but he's finished damn near every single one of his fights in the first round. We have no real evidence of him in overall extended striking based exchanges. There's no real evidence that he can win minutes in extended fights. There's no real evidence that he can out wrestle people, out grapple people outside of the guy that death gassed worse than him on the Contender Series. Only decision I think that he's won in his entire career, which he also death gassed in, I might add. I mean, Santos went 25 minutes with John Jones and fought him to a split on a torn ACL. Like, when you put those two things side to side, I don't know. I don't think there's too much to say, to be honest. Thiago Santos is more proven, more battle tested, but Walker is the king of memes. But nonetheless, from an overall outcome and in skill set standpoint, Thiago Santos has pretty much 10,000 more outs as to why he should be like probably 75% in this fight. So if I do end up playing it, it's probably not something I'm going to be, overtly heavy on, despite a decent edge that I think I'm getting to just safeguard against the Walker KO. But as hard as Walker hits, Santos has about damn near just as good of a finishing rate and has finished better guys than Walker has before too. So, yeah, I think it's a decent spot for Santos. But if you wanted to take just a general fight violence based approach, target those fights don't start. I think anything round 3 and below, I think is probably good.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the only real question is just how likely is an early Walker KO, right? In terms of capping the fight, like if you don't think it's better than 25%, I mean, I don't really see how Santos loses a decision, if I'm being completely honest.
He's not.
Yeah.
He's not.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't hate a play on Santos. But yeah, guys, thanks for coming out tonight. Really appreciate it. If you like the show, please drop a like and subscribe. It would help us out a lot. As usual, I'm John. You can find me on Twitter at MMA Fox, with Luke at SWR_betting. We'll be back next week at 10 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday. And as always, good luck this weekend, guys. Take it easy.